This is episode number 129, featuring the amazing artist Ray Roberts.
This is the PleinAir podcast with Eric Rhodes, publisher and founder of PleinAir magazine. In the PleinAir podcast, we cover the world of outdoor painting. Called PleinAir, the French coined the term, which means open air or outdoors. The French pronounce it plein air. Others say PleinAir. No matter how you say it, there is a huge movement of artists around the world who are going outdoors to paint. And this show is about that movement. Now, here's your host, author, publisher, and painter, Eric Rhodes.
Well, thank you, Jim Kipping, and welcome to the PleinAir podcast. My name is Eric, and I am on a giant high. I had about 70 painters last week at the Publishers Invitational in the Adirondacks. We had a blast. Oh, man, we had so much fun. We painted all day. We ate our meals together. We sat up at night, did portraits. We sang. We danced. We just, we really had a lot of fun. Met a lot of nice people. If you want to see pics, I will put them on Instagram and Facebook. I'm putting out a little bit every day because I'm not trying to jam them up. You can find me at Eric Rhodes, R-H-O-A-D-S. So my Facebook name is Eric Rhodes. My Instagram name is Eric Rhodes. My real name is Eric Rhodes. Anyway, by the way, Facebook doesn't let me have more than 5,000 friends. I'm at my max, but you can still follow, even though I can't respond by reciprocating with friendship. I'm sorry about that. Mark Zuckerberg doesn't return my calls. What can I tell you? Anyway, the next time we do this is my event called Fall Color Week. We're going to be painting in the land of Georgia O'Keeffe at Ghost Ranch in New Mexico. It's just a week of painting and fun. Just me and a few friends. Check it out at fallcolorweek.com. I am also blown away. Absolutely. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this in my career. The PleinAir convention is going to be in Colorado in 2020 in May. Today's guest, Ray Roberts, and his lovely bride, Peggy Kroll Roberts, are going to be on stage along with others like Scott Christensen, who is also doing a pre-convention workshop, and Kwang Ho and many others. Thomas Schaller, the watercolor master, is going to be doing a pre-convention workshop. And anyway, believe it or not, it's less than a year away, maybe a month less than a year away. And it's like 75% sold out. It's pretty incredible. Probably ought to get those tickets. It's it's going to be incredible. Painting in places like Rocky Mountain National Park, Estes Park, etc. It's pretty cool. The interview is underwritten by our own magazine, PleinAir. PleinAir magazine is painting from nature outdoors, in plein air, and painting from life. They're all the foundations of painting throughout art history. Today, tens of thousands of people are part of the movement. You can join the movement, and the basis of that is to kind of get involved with PleinAir magazine. You'll be read about the artists, read about the techniques. Comes out every other month, print and digital. You can subscribe at pleinairmagazine.com. Coming up after the interview, I'm going to be answering some art marketing questions in the Marketing Minute. But first, let's get to our interview. I'm anxious for this one. Ray Roberts. Ray Roberts, welcome to the PleinAir podcast.
Thanks, Eric.
Hey, I am really jazzed to have you on. You and I, we kind of go way back. I mean, not way, way back, but you were one of the first people that I ever encountered when I started learning about this whole plein air thing. And such an inspiration. I have, sitting beside me right here in the studio, I have a painting that I got from you. And it was an award-winning painting at the Tahoe Plein Air Painters of America event. And it's been sitting here at my side for years, and it still inspires me.
Wow. Well, thanks, Eric. I'm thrilled that you have it, and I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks again.
So I think that you're one of the people who was kind of early in this new generation of early this plein air movement. I don't know if you consider yourself a plein air painter anymore, because I know you do a lot of studio work. Help me understand and help our audience understand kind of where your head is at in all of this.
Oh my gosh, I wish I knew. I I enjoyed getting out every once in a while to paint, but mostly it's just to get notes. It's my approach anymore is a real traditional approach where I go out, I get color notes, I get ideas, I get inspiration, and then I go back in the studio and work up larger paintings.
So, what are your thoughts about this whole idea of a lot of people are going out with the notion of completing a painting, and I know that there's kind of a philosophy with a lot of people that you're familiar with who they believe it really should just be about notes. Is there, in your opinion, a right or wrong? Does it matter?
No, not at all. Not at all. In fact, when I first started going out, I would go back out to the same location, same time of day, and work on large paintings and finish them up on location. And it's just depending on the weather, depending on all sorts of things. It's really hard to do that. It's much easier to do it in the studio. But and going out there and doing finished work, that's awesome. That's awesome if you can do that, if you can pull that off. More power to you.
Well, Albert Handel says that there are plein air painters and there are studio painters who paint outside. Is there a significant difference between the work that you do, the larger studio work? Is it equally as energetic and filled with the thick brush strokes and so on that you have kind of become known for? Or do you finesse it a lot more with more detail, et cetera? Can you explain that?
Oh, that's a tough one. It's hard for me to look at my work objectively and tell you whether or not I'm achieving the same effect. I just treat each painting as its own entity and try to complete it to my own satisfaction, however I define that at the moment. I try to put some paint down. I don't know if I put it down as thick as I used to, but yeah, I guess I'm more or less a plein air painter that likes to paint in the studio.
Yeah. So what is the evolution that you've gone through? How many years have you been painting?
There's a lot of gray area there. I started out as an illustrator.
Okay.
In the 70s, and I did paint. I did go to some night classes. Did some oil painting. In '84, Peggy and I took a class from Dan McCaw, and that was a lot of fun. But we were having children, so I really didn't start getting outdoors to paint until the early '90s. So I've been an illustrator for the first 12 years of my art career, and for the last 20, I don't know, almost 30 years I've been painting, oil painting.
So for somebody who's kind of just getting started, or maybe somebody who's into it for 5 or even 10 years, what do you think is the evolution that a painter goes through? What for instance, and I don't know if it's the same for all of us, it's probably not, but for instance, when I first started painting, I was I had I don't know if this isn't a mistaken belief, but it was a belief that I needed to be as close to photographic and as much detail as possible. And over time, I've gotten much looser. I've gotten much less vibrant color, etc. Is there an evolution that you kind of think people go through?
Yeah, like you said, I don't think it's true for every single person. I've known a lot of people who've gone from very loose to very tight, and from very tight to very loose. I think it's just your own personal journey. For me, it's just defining whatever artist I am, defining that artist. I think we all have our own journeys and we have our own destinations. I don't think it's cut and dried.
Okay, well that makes sense. I guess we each kind of find our way. And when did you first decide that you were going to go outdoors and paint?
Oh my gosh. Well, I think we were we wanted to, but we also had little kids, and so it took a while for me to get outside. I guess it was the early 90s, 91, 92, when I started doing that. We had kids, and we were encouraged by this friend of ours. We were living in Scottsdale, and he was saying, "Oh gosh, there's got a new school down there, Scottsdale Art School. Go down there and do open sessions." So we did that, and then this friend of ours it was just a few years ahead of us, and he was shifting from illustration to fine art, and he told us about a show that he was going to have. He's going to have like 100 6x8 inch paintings, and I go, he's going to charge $500 for them. I thought he was crazy, but we started taking those classes, and he had a show, and Kevin McPherson ended up doing pretty good for himself.
Yeah, I'd say so. So that was kind of the motivation. And, we oftentimes discuss what changed when you went outdoors. How did it impact your work?
Honest color. When you're in the studio, you're kind of guessing. You're only as good as what you're painting from. And if you're painting from photographs, your paintings are going to look like photographs. And if you're painting outdoors, you're getting more of a direct interpretation of the color. That's basically.
Yeah. All right. So let's get into some advice in terms of people who are either starting out or maybe, I kind of like to go into two places, people who are starting out and then people who are they've been doing it a while, but they're trying to get to the next level. What is your advice? You do a lot of teaching, you have an online training thing. So what is it that you kind of try to take students through? What's the process?
A lot of when I was in art school, we learned all the basics, and that's one thing that seems to be a common theme in plein air painters is that they don't have that basic studio approach of understanding light and shadow. And so I try to get everybody to see things in terms of light and shadow, as if you were in an atelier and you had one light source and it was a plaster cast, and you paint everything in light, one value, and everything in shadow, another value. So I've got a real classic approach to painting landscapes, and that's the one thing that I try to stress.
And what's the in terms of learning light and shadow? What is the most misunderstood part of that?
Well, I believe that in order to create form, most everything in shadow should be darker than anything in light, and it's something that just it's not. I think when people are starting out, when they're using colors, they don't see the true value of a color. They don't see how dark an orange color or a red color. They have difficulty seeing the value of the color. So working in black and white is a really good thing to do.
A great way to really understand your values.
Yes.
So is that your recommendation? Is the kind of the first step for everybody is just work in black and white?
Yeah, for 2 or 3 years, if they can do it, if they can stand it.
Yeah. Well, it's tough. I mean, because color is so seductive, but what a great training ground if you can do it. Absolutely. Yes.
When I got out of art school, I didn't have a very strong portfolio because I was a split major. What I did was I got a lot of jobs doing black and white illustration, so I kind of caught up doing that approach, and unbeknownst to me at the time, I was actually working on my values, and I've come to find out a lot of my painting buddies had the same path. John Budison, Ken Oster, they did a lot of black and white illustration.
Well, and I think that you can really tell it. You know, when you're painting next to a true pro, that the one thing that they seem to do consistently is they really nail their values, and the rest of us kind of struggle with this whole idea of getting it right. And when the values are there, everything else comes together.
Yes, I agree. Yep.
And then, so painting values is one of the core principles of learning. What else? What are the other things that you try to get them to do?
I try to get them to paint small and to paint fast. I find that painting fast seems to take a lot of the thinking out of it. If you want to paint intuitively, you paint fast. If you want to capture fleeting light, those really dramatic moments, you need to paint fast. Sometimes I'll premix my colors too, and maybe revisit the same place more than once. Well, maybe visit the same place more than once, so that you become more familiar with it, and you can learn to anticipate what's going to happen with the light and stuff.
Now, when you say paint small, how small do you recommend? Like 8 by 10 or smaller than that?
Yeah, 8 by 10 or smaller. Sometimes I'll divide a 12 by 16 canvas into quarters. That way I don't have to, change the canvas off my easel. Yeah.
Okay.
That 4 6 by 8s essentially.
Yeah, well, and what's nice about that is, the limitations of plein air painting when you go out and you spend 3 hours on a painting is that you can only do 1 or 2 a day. But if you're in a location that's got multiple beauty or multiple places, great compositions, then if you're painting small, you can get a lot of studies done that you can use for other things in the future. Makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I've got paintings. I've got small sketches. I'll go back years to use as reference for current paintings that I'm working on now.
So, transferring a study into a studio piece, you're either relying on a lot of memory, or you're relying on a photograph if you want to put more depth or detail into it. How do you do this? Because I know that McPherson always talked about how he would lay a piece of acetate over so he could match the color exactly, so that, when he was doing a larger painting from a study. But, a study is quick, it's impulsive, it's missing a lot of information that probably would be present in a studio piece. Am I misunderstanding that, or do you try to put more depth into those studio pieces?
I try to stay as true to the color study as I can in terms of color relationships, color and value relationships. And if I am lacking detail or information in my color study that I want to work in my studio painting, then I will do that in the family of the colors that I did my study with, and then just change values, a little bit of value, a little bit of drawing, but essentially stay as true to the color study as possible.
And go ahead.
I'm sorry, does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. And
okay.
And in terms of really understanding color, what does it really take to get that right? Because, most of us don't even get exposed to color temperature in the first couple of years of painting because it just seems a little bit complex. Is there a right way to approach this to understand color temperature, color harmony, shadow color, etc.?
I think we're all going to be on our own individual path to finding whatever look they get. My approach is to look for the extreme of each color hue on location, and then measuring the intensity of the color, and then putting that note down. I try to err on the side of warmth instead of having too cool of paintings. I don't like paintings that are too blue or purple. So again, I think it's all individual. we're all going to get there eventually, but for me, it's finding color relationships in the hue comparisons, hue relationships.
Can you articulate that a little bit more so people understand what you mean by color relationships?
Well, like what's the most what's the reddest red in my scene? What's the rosiest rose in my scene? What's the grayest gray in my scene? The yellow green. I go all the way around the color wheel and find out where every color temperature, where every color is in my scene, and then make a note of that. I won't use a color in a painting because it looks good. I use it because I see it in my scene, and I figure out where it is on the color wheel and how intense it is and how that relates to every other color in my scene. It's all about color relationships and value relationships for me.
So, and you said earlier you're looking for the most intense color. Can you touch on that just a little bit more, why you're doing that?
Yeah, good question. That's, yes, if I'm looking at some flowers and I see some bright red flowers next to some red dirt next to a grayish or a rosy color house, I try to figure out which one's the purest color in my scene, and then I find out which one is the grayest color in my scene. And so it's like on a scale of intensity. What's the brightest? You see, you take a red and you slowly mix it until it goes to gray. I figure out which color is the brightest one, and then I compare that to every other color in my scene, and then make each other compared to that how much grayer it should be on a gray scale, on a scale of intensity.
So the beginners tend to want to make everything high intensity color, I think. In other words, if you're standing in a field of just unbelievably bright, glowing green, yellow-green grass, and then the trees have got a lot of color on the light side of them, and you've got the mountain in the background, etc. The tendency is just to want to make that all high chroma. Is that what you're doing, or are you trying to make sure that your intense chroma is in one particular spot, which is going to draw the eye more, and then everything else gets backed off?
I go with the latter. I try to figure out the most intense color and then appropriately gray down every other color that's in my scene. If you have too much strong color, all primary colors, they tend to nil each other out, and it's hard to. It kind of makes a garish painting, is what it does.
So you're not necessarily painting what you see. Then you're really controlling what's getting the intensity. No,
I would say I am painting what I'm seeing, and I am controlling what gets the most intensity according to my scene.
Okay.
So a lot of success, I believe, in my painting, a lot of success depends on selection of what you're painting. If you're going to paint Bryce Canyon and it's all orange cliffs with brilliant blue sky, you're going to get a really bright, harsh kind of painting. But if you go to some place that's not so harsh, you're going to get a little bit more nuanced painting.
So you're really looking for that. So let's talk about composition, because you're a master at composition. How do you learn how to compose a painting? Is there a formula? Is it a gut feel? A lot of people talk about dividing the canvas into quarters or thirds. Doing a grid. There's the golden mean. What works for you?
I think all those are effective tools for creating compositions. It's important to, for me, I joke about it in my workshops where I say the single most important part to painting are the 3 Ds. I mean, Yes, the 3Ds: design, design, design. And yeah, so it's light and dark pattern. And if you can avoid having anything equal, look for dynamic shapes, balance with tension, any kind of words that you can use to describe something that's very dynamic and interesting in terms of light and dark patterns. That's where I try to go for my design. And thank you for the compliment.
What does that mean, tension?
Imagine you have a blank canvas and you have a diagonal line going from upper left to lower right. What the tension is that you're going to keep going right off the edge of your canvas unless you have some opposing shape or opposing line going the opposite direction or going a different direction. That's the balance with tension that I was attempting to describe.
So you're basically controlling the eye movement.
Yes.
Yeah.
With shapes and line and anything else I can use.
Now, when you're composing something, are you trying intentionally to make the eye go to one place first and then move to a second place and kind of take them through the painting, or are you just kind of hoping it works out that way?
I'm always hoping that it works out that way, but I am essentially just trying to design no-tans, 2 or 3, 4 value shapes that have an interesting pattern, interesting light and dark pattern. I believe design is achieved with value and light and dark shapes.
All right, I'm going to just bring up a word that you mentioned that some people might not be familiar with, which is no-tan. Do you want to explain that?
No-tan is just simply black and white. It's either black or white shapes, and that's from the Japanese, right, Peggy? Mm-hmm. Just simple black and white designs.
All right. So in terms of best ways to really learn design, do you have a recommendation?
Oh, boy. Yes, just boil your scene down to 2 or 3 values and working in black and white and trying to see the abstract nature of it. Avoid equal-sized shapes and anything equal angles, symmetry, anything symmetrical, tangencies, anything that's equal, and just do, thousands of black and white interpretations of your scene.
And in terms of big shapes, that's essentially, you hear a lot of painters talking about big shapes all the time. That's essentially what you're meaning in this case, is boil it all down to big shapes, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, big shapes. I think the bigger the shapes, the better. It's you have a more immediate response to something that's got larger shapes as opposed to a bazillion other shapes, or more.
Right.
And we all are drawn in the beginning. We're all drawn to the all the different stuff that you're looking at. I mean, it's hard to focus on anything, but if you squint or use any of the digital tools we have at our disposal these days, you can break a painting down into larger, simpler shapes. And also looking at historic artists who are very good at it, like Maynard Dixon and Edgar Payne and those guys.
Do you have any favorites in terms of historical?
I have got several favorites, and they're all depending on what they painted and what their different time periods and stuff like that, and subject matter. So I can't really nail it down to who's my favorite landscape painter or who's my favorite figure painter. They're just all my favorites.
It's kind of like asking who's your favorite child. I know, it's tough.
That's right.
So let's kind of boil this down to let's kind of give it a let's figure out what's a top five. I going back again, to the early stage painter. What are in order? What are the top five things you want them to focus on in what order? Number one would be what?
Drawing.
Drawing. Oh, we haven't even talked about drawing, have we?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
So, and you said that a lot of people, when you see they're starting out, they're missing some of the basics. So, what's the best possible thing they can do to perfect their drawing skills before they do anything else?
Well, I can only talk about my path, and I just took a lot of figure drawing classes in school. Given I had electives each semester, and they were always drawing classes. So you cannot design without drawing. Without being able to draw the way you want to draw, you cannot capture the scene that you want to see without having notable drawing skills. It's the essential. It's what's essential to painting.
So you know the counterintuitive part about this though is that if somebody doesn't want to be a figure or portrait painter, you're saying figure drawing is a great way to learn, and yet if you're a landscape person, why does figure drawing matter?
Well, figure drawing, if you're going to paint a landscape, you can make a tree look like a tree. But if you're drawing a figure, you're going to get busted right off the bat. You have to get the proportions right. You have to get the angles right. Everybody can recognize a poor drawing when it comes to the figure. You can get away with things when you're painting a landscape. But if you really want to nail what you're trying to paint, if you really want to paint accurately what you're trying to paint, you're going to need to have good drawing skills. Now, I'm not saying that you have to be a figure painter, that you have to draw figures to improve your drawing skills. I know a lot of very accomplished landscape artists who have gotten there just by drawing and painting the landscape. But drawing is essential to their success in landscape painting.
Well, this kind of goes back to this idea or this notion of abstract art, and I think that, and I'm not trying to stir anything up here, but I think that sometimes people do abstract because they don't know how to draw, so they kind of let themselves off the hook by, well, it doesn't have to be perfect, but if you learn those skills to perfection where, somebody can recognize that drawing or that individual that you're drawing and you get the proportions right, everything else is going to fall into place.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So number two, okay, so we started with drawing. Number two is?
Well, I think design.
Design? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, working on design, working light and dark patterns.
Okay. Number three is?
Doing lots of small sketches. And yeah.
And then where do values fall into this?
Your original question, what 5 things?
What are the 5 essentials if you're going on a path that you're trying to learn to paint? What are the 5 essential things that you need to master?
Yeah, design. Did I say design?
Yep.
Drawing, design, values. Yeah, I think values. Working on your values, working in black and white is a very good exercise.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to move to the next level of individual, and that's somebody like me who's been painting for a long time, but I just am still not crushing it like I want to. How do you get, I understand these basics. I understand color. I understand shape and design, I think, but how do you kind of push yourself to a higher level once you've kind of got that good foundation? What separates the good painters from the great painters? How do you elevate yourself to that level?
Well, it's kind of like a pyramid. I think that there are a lot of great painters out there, 95% of them, and then it just gets smaller and smaller as you get towards the top of the pyramid. And it's just the little things that are going to improve. That's going to make the difference between the the top 100 and then to the top 10 or wherever your favorite painter is. I think being able to objectively look at your art, to be able to objectively look at your painting, is what's going to make the difference. It's I use a mirror. Do you use a mirror? I photograph my work and look at it through the camera's eye. I photograph it and look at it in terms of black and white. I go over each painting and see if I've got any kind of equal size shapes, any kind of tangency. I just got a whole list of scrutinies that I run my paintings through, and ultimately I believe it's being able to objectively look at your paintings and then figure out what it is that is not making it the best painting that you can possibly do. Sometimes turning a painting to the wall and not looking at it for a few weeks, and then all of a sudden turning it around, you'll see what's wrong with it. It's our inability to really scrutinize our paintings, objectively look at our paintings, that is keeping us from getting to the next level.
Yeah, well, that's hard. And do you ever? Well, you obviously have another artist in the family that you can get criticism from. But do you ever do that, or do you ever send it off to other people and say, I'm not feeling it. Something's wrong. What do you see?
Occasionally, yeah, we do that. But not unless we're asked for it. Though we don't offer. I mean.
No, I'm suggesting in your own case. I'm not telling them to come to you. What I'm saying is that, do you ever, like, you're struggling with something, and so you email a picture to a buddy of yours and say, hey, I don't know what's wrong. Are you seeing anything?
I think that's a very good way of doing it. I know a lot of professionals who do that. Fortunately for me, I've got a professional in my own family that I can help. I mean, that I can ask her for help.
Yeah. And Ray is referring to Peggy Kroll Roberts, his wife, who's also a fabulous artist.
Yes, I am.
Well, so Ray, why do you keep doing this? What drives you to continue to paint?
Oh my gosh. Well, I've got a lot of things that I want to do with my art. I mean, I only see things that I'm not happy with. I like what Edgar Payne, he quoted somebody. It was Whistler, I think. Oh no, it's Chase, and he talked about never being satisfied for reaching for a mere star, but go for the greatest one. I'm on the hunt for doing the best paintings that I can possibly do. And that's a tall order, given what I look at every day on the internet. So yeah, I'm on a personal mission here to do the best work I can.
So how do you balance that with the gallery who's saying more Little Red Barns because they sell well?
I do the best Little Red Barn I can do. No, that's funny when I go, okay, yeah, I'll do more Red Barns, and then I go back to the studio and I go, I don't feel like doing any Red Barns. I think I'll do this instead. So John Asaro once told me that you paint what you sell, and fortunately I haven't sold a lot of Red Barns, and I've got a whole group of subject matters that I really enjoy painting, and I guess people have been buying those, so I enjoy painting them.
Yeah. So the advice is paint what you love.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that comes through. If you're doing something to quote unquote manufacture, if you don't love it, it's going to come across in your painting. I would think the emotion that you're putting into something will show.
Yeah, I agree.
So, in terms of before we wrap this up, do you have any final thoughts of anything that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Oh boy, that's a tough one. Paint. If you see something and you're going, well, should I paint that? Just go ahead and paint it. Go ahead and paint it. It's impossible to visualize something unless you paint it. I always thought that certain people could visualize a painting before they painted it, but I've come to learn that you can't. That you have to paint it. Even if it's a small, quick sketch, go ahead and paint it. Don't sit and speculate whether or not it's going to work. Just do it.
And how much? I know this is a crazy question. How much should you be painting? I mean, if you should be painting every day. Do you paint every day? What's it look like?
I would if I could. But I've got other things that come up, and it's a lot of times it seems like I just have to travel and get to places, and as much as I'd like to stop and paint there, I have other commitments. Yeah, I'm good for about 6 hours a day before I'm completely worn out.
Yeah. Well, that's good. If you're getting 6 hours in, that's pretty good. Well, Ray, this has been delightful. You are a true inspiration to, I think, the entire PleinAir community. Your work is absolutely fabulous, but you're also such a giving and generous man in terms of wanting to help others. You know, you're not holding anything back. You're a great teacher. People love you, and I'm just honored that you would do this today.
Oh, Eric, you're too kind. Boy. Wow, thank you. Well, I'm just what you've done for the PleinAir community. I think it's fantastic. You've really created a whole world upon it. It's so accessible with you and everything that you put together for our community. I really appreciate what you do.
Well, that's very kind. It just needed to be done, so somebody had to do it. Well, Ray, thanks again for being on the PleinAir podcast.
Thank you so much, Eric.
Thanks again to Ray Roberts, and what an amazing, inspirational painter. Really, really great guy, too. Well, you ready for some marketing ideas?
This is the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhodes, author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Make More Money Selling Your Art. Proven techniques to turn your passion into profit.
You can send me your marketing questions, eric@pleinairmagazine.com. Here's a question from Sally Malmstrom. It's not really a marketing question, but I thought it would be valuable. Sally says, when you die, what do you recommend your family do with all your artwork, and how should you write it into your will? Well, Sally, I am not an estate attorney. I'm sure it's different from state to state. It's not so much a marketing thing, but I've heard some horror stories from families of artists who had sold their paintings, and they went into the studio, cataloged all the unsold paintings in the studio, and got taxed on them, even paintings that were never intended to be sold, but they were given the same value as the paintings that had been sold in the past. And we've seen families get stuck with these massive estate taxes. So you need to talk to somebody who's an expert about that if you got a lot of paintings to leave. And they could also inform you. You know, I've heard things like it's okay to gift people before you die and, give them to your kids and stuff like that. But, again, there's some things that you got to do. There's certain values you cannot exceed, et cetera. So you got to be thinking about all those things. And you really need to talk to an expert, and I am not an expert. The next question comes from Alicia Pulsher. I don't know where Alicia's from, but she says, your lecture seems to be geared more towards populated areas and possibly larger markets. What do you recommend for those of us who live in a small populated or rural area and an area that's economically challenged? What do you recommend besides moving? Well, there's a lot of advantages to being in small towns and small areas, and that is you get to know everybody, they get to know you, and cost of living is oftentimes very reasonable. So no reason to move, Alicia. I think it's a good question, and I think you need to know that in every town, even depressed areas, there are people with money. There are people who own the businesses that you frequent, the people who own the restaurants, the people who own the shopping places, the people who own the gas stations. Some of these people have money. And sometimes there's not a lot of money in a depressed area, but most depressed areas still have doctors and lawyers and people who make good money. And if you need to sell paintings, they're the people to sell paintings to. Now, you can also expand outside of your town and expand into your region. Your region might be large enough that there are places, other towns, other places like lake or vacation homes, other communities. I'm a big fan of selling locally. In my art marketing in a box program, we teach everybody how to sell locally and give them the tools to do that. And they're making good money locally as artists. But you start out by finding out if there's money in your town. The people you and I hang out with may not have it, but there are people out there that have it. And if you're seeing high-end homes, expensive cars, around there's money. All right? Just keep that in mind. Now you got to figure out how to tap it. One of the best ways to tap it is to get involved in local charities, local community, golf courses and clubs and things like that, and get yourself known. I think that's really a good thing. I also think every artist needs to consider having a local and a national strategy. Local meaning local. National being be in the places where there is money. Be in the galleries in towns where people are spending money, whether it's New York City or Hawaii, or whether it's, San Jose or wherever it happens to be. I think, there's a lot of places that sell a lot of paintings, and a lot of the artists don't live locally. So this is a good opportunity for you to develop relationships with galleries. In my art marketing bootcamp videos, I kind of talk about how to get invited into galleries, what's the inappropriate way to approach galleries and so on, because they get approached by literally thousands of people, and that's not fun for them. So anyway, I hope this helps. Thank you for listening today to the Plein Air Podcast. Better get those tickets to the Plein Air Convention in Colorado and the Scott Christensen or the Thomas Schaller pre-convention workshops too, because I don't think, based on how rapidly everything's going right now, I don't think those are going to last. And also, I don't really know the figure, but last week at about this time, we were about 75 or more % sold out. So Colorado is going to be a big hit. You want to go there. Also, if you've not seen my blog where I talk about life, art, and stuff, especially stuff, check it out. It's called Sunday Coffee, and you can find it at coffeewitheric.com. I love doing this. It's fun for me. I hope you've enjoyed it. Let's do it again sometime like next week. And remember, it's a big world out there. Go paint it. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
This has been the Plein Air Podcast with Plein Air Magazine's Eric Rhodes. You can help spread the word about plein air painting by sharing this podcast with your friends. And you can leave a review or subscribe on iTunes so it comes to you every week. And you can even reach Eric by email, eric@pleinairmagazine.com. Be sure to pick up our free ebook, 240 plein air painting tips by some of America's top painters. It's free at pleinairtips.com. Tune in next week for more great interviews. Thanks for listening.